Hi, this is Joe, and this is the Film Joe podcast, where film talk happens.
One, two, three, four.
Hi, I'm Joe, your host, and I'm joined here by Owen, my co-host and my sound engineer. Say hi, Owen.
Hello, Joe. How you doing today?
Not bad, not bad. For this is our first episode, huh?
Very exciting. Very exciting. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, I mean, so let's not screw it up.
Yeah, we'll try not to.
So today's episode we'll be discussing Steven Spielberg, his career, and mostly we'll be talking about his influences, how he's influenced film in general, and latter day filmmakers that followed him.
I think he's always been a good director, a good producer. He's come out with a lot of hits, and
Yeah. I mean, not just successful films, but we're talking iconic films that have influenced.
Well, I want to start off with asking why is this first episode on Steven Spielberg?
Okay.
Why did you choose him?
Well, I'm not gonna lie. Okay, I'm gonna be honest here. And if it sounds like I'm gushing from point to point every now and then over Spielberg, well, I am gushing. I love Steven Spielberg. He pretty much solidified my love for film.
So he got you into it.
Yeah, well, it actually started back in '77 when I first saw Star Wars. I just gave away my age, didn't I? I was fascinated by what really transpired to be real movie magic, film magic. Transporting me to another galaxy, another world. Being introduced to fantastical characters and creatures and worlds. It just blew me away.
What was the first movie that?
It was Star Wars.
Star Wars?
Yeah. I mean, I had other films that I watched when I was a kid, but Star Wars was the one that really ignited that fire. That there's something behind this curtain of magic. It was incredible. I loved it.
Yeah, you wonder how they make it. The movie magic that goes behind it.
Yeah. It was pretty neat because when I was a kid, they'd have these bubblegum cards that you'd buy, or collector's cards, and I started collecting Star Wars bubblegum cards. And on the back of some of these, they had film facts.
Oh, yeah, they still do that.
Yeah, and it's really neat. They would talk about a specific sequence in the film and how the actor contributed to the scene, or how they did it, and it just blew me away. It kind of like, for me, it pulled the curtain aside.
It was kind of like, because with the my generation, we just, for that stuff, we had like the DVD features,
right?
Extras,
Exactly.
So this is kind of before that.
Right. I mean, our DVD features.
The precursor of that, you gotta buy bubblegum cards.
That was our DVD features.
That sounds like such a better deal, though.
Yeah, and it was pretty neat, and so I really got into film at that point, and
well, did Steven Spielberg he directed or produced Star Wars?
He had nothing to do with it.
Nothing to do with it?
But it was my springboard into film.
Oh, okay.
I was really actually I was first introduced to Spielberg in 1981.
What was the first Spielberg movie that kind of got you into?
It was Raiders of the Lost Ark. And I mean, I had already been at that point, I was a film geek already at that point, but I was already familiar with Steven Spielberg with Jaws, that came out of '75, and Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And I thought he was a neat filmmaker, but I wasn't really per se a fan. And it wasn't until '81 when, the TV spot comes on and it says, from the makers of Star Wars and Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I was like, wow, Spielberg and Lucas teaming up for Raiders. And from then on, I just became fascinated with his work. It fueled my love and passion for film.
You know, that's a good thing. You know, Steven Spielberg is such a great starting point.
Hmm.
You know,
Well, it was the beginning of a new a new film movement, which
Yeah.
we'll talk about in a little bit. Um, so,
well, we got to do our watch report.
oh, watch report. That's right. I almost forgot about that. So, what is the watch report?
Well, you know, we discuss what we recently watched. You know, whatever it's TV shows or movies, mostly movies though, but that's about it.
Okay, cool. Well, I guess I'll start. Yeah. So, I just recently watched. The most recent thing I watched was, what was it? Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
See, that's a classic.
That is a
I
classic.
haven't seen it in a good minute, but that one I remember. It's fun.
Yeah. I mean, not to mention the most paused sequence in film history.
Oh, definitely.
Aside from that, I mean, it was just, it was a love letter
So
to
many of those posters in every room.
Exactly. It was just a love letter to the 80s, but it came out in the 80s. Just a great film. Sean Penn's star-making role. Even though he was, what, maybe 15 minutes in the film, maybe less. I'm not sure.
That was his first role.
Yeah, I
That's
believe
amazing.
so. The people out there, don't quote me. Don't send me angry hate mail and saying that I'm an idiot and I got my facts wrong. But I do believe it was his first role, if not his star-making role. And I mean, and so great film, a lot of fun. Amy Heckerling directed it back in what was it, 1982, I believe it was. Good film. Yeah. So that, and I just recently saw a new holiday Christmas
Oh,
classic.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. I mean, this is without a doubt.
Violent Night.
Violent Night.
See, that was totally out of nowhere.
Yeah.
To have a Christmas movie like that, but it's so amazing.
Well, they blended. It was Santa Claus meets Die Hard.
Yeah, I liked how they did that.
Yeah.
You know, even the Die Hard reference. In it.
And no spoilers. I mean, but they do give Santa Claus a really neat background.
I feel like they give him like, once again, no spoilers, but they give him a certain personality, and like it's a whole new Santa.
Yeah.
It's a new character. And I think it's a pretty badass character.
Oh, absolutely, and definitely, like you said, a new kind of Santa.
You know, it reminds me of the old bad Santa movies, but
Right.
instead of just being
Yeah.
an a-hole, he's actually a badass.
He's a superhero almost. It was neat.
Can I say
And
ass?
huh?
Can I say ass?
Mm,
I already said it once.
yeah, I think we're good. We don't get kicked off of Amazon or Spotify.
Yeah, right.
So the other film I saw was All Hallows Eve. It's a strange little horror movie directed by Damien Leone. Well, was the first appearance, well, in film form, and not short, of Art the Clown, the star slasher of the new Terrifier films.
Terrifier, right?
Yeah. And it was, I mean, I love Terrifier. Terrifier was great. Terrifier 2, I mean,
I've only
both.
seen the first one. That's all I can handle.
Oh, yeah. You don't want to do a double feature. I did a double feature one night and ended up having to watch Sandra Bullock in Miss Congeniality
You're
afterwards.
like, let's put on a Disney movie or something a little bit more.
Yeah.
upbeat.
It was intense, but really good. Old school, very resourceful filmmaking, using a lot of old school techniques, practical gore effects. It was great. I loved it. So I got curious and I heard about All Hallows Eve, which was a film released beforehand, and
So it's like a prequel.
it's
Or is it
basic.
just like one of their first just films about it? that they
Well,
use
it's an anthology.
anthology?
Yeah, you have a wraparound story. You got like 3 different stories. I don't want to give away anything. But it was less than good.
What, you don't like it?
Let's just put it this way. I saw what the guy was doing. I saw what Leone was capable of. He had a lot of points in the film where you go, wow, this is a good technique he's using, good camera angle, good devices, and so forth. So it's kind of like this is the making of the director, in progress before he got to the Terrifier films.
You're seeing how his
Potential.
You see his potential. You see, how he grows.
Exactly. And so it was, I kind of finished off with, but it was still good to watch. So what about you? What you just recently watched?
I mean, I'm kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum. A little bit way over there. My wife actually wanted to watch Mamma Mia for the first time.
Mamma Mia.
Mamma Mia.
Oh, Lord.
You
Okay.
ever seen that?
I've seen parts of it.
You've only seen parts of it.
Yeah, let's just say I'm not a big ABBA fan.
So that's where you can't watch.
And again, I might get a lot of hate mail for this, but no, I don't. I'm not an ABBA fan.
See, that's one of the things that kind of got me into it, is that, like, ABBA's really good. I know you don't like it, but I feel like they're an integral part of music in general, and their songwriting, amazing. And to go with the musical, I think the musical came out in the 90s.
Yeah,
the show.
I
Right?
believe so. Yeah, it was a Broadway musical.
And and then the early 2000s, they made the movie with what's her face, Meryl Streep, and I don't know the other girl. But
It was Pierce Brosnan in that.
something like that.
James Bond.
The lady from you seen Harry Potter, right?
Yes.
You
Yes.
know the Weasley mom.
Right.
Oh,
Right.
she was in it. She was one
Okay.
of the friends to Donna. Was.
Okay.
But yeah, my wife's never seen it. She's always wanted to see it, so we ended up doing a double feature.
Oh Lord.
She liked the first one so much. She's like, "Where's the second one?"
Oh my God.
Here we go again.
Oh,
No,
okay.
but I liked it. I'm not truly a fan about that type of
Right.
plot or whatever, but it was sweet.
And and the things, I'm a fan of musicals. I like a
musicals are great.
yeah. I mean, most recently, West Side Story was a great film. Chicago was
Still
amazing.
haven't seen West Side Story. The new
Oh,
one.
it's a Spielberg masterpiece.
Chicago I've seen though.
Right.
I watched that.
Oh, Chicago was amazing. It was a great
when
film.
It first came out.
Catherine Zeta-Jones was in that, and it was just an amazing film. So yeah, but I'll have to pass on the Mamma Mia recommendation there. So okay. So let's go ahead and dive right into the episode. So like I said, we're talking about Steven Spielberg, as an influential filmmaker, an iconic filmmaker. I would say one of the greatest filmmakers, but definitely a great filmmaker.
Why would you say he's one of the greatest?
I wouldn't. I mean, yeah, geez.
I mean, I'm pretty inclined to agree right there.
Right.
I'm just wondering.
I mean, you got you got John Huston, and you have Scorsese, you got Coppola, but I think
He was
yeah. I mean, because trust me, I mean, Spielberg did.
he was a vital part in film.
Oh,
cinema
absolutely,
history, right?
absolutely, and I've seen all of his films, and loved all of them. Well, with the exception of Hook, and that's another story. I'm not going into that.
Hook is a good one. What are you
No.
talking about?
I beg to differ.
Why didn't you like it?
Miscasting. Come on, Dustin Hoffman.
I thought he was
Oh,
perfect
God.
for the Hook. Are you kidding me?
I mean, I like Dustin Hoffman. I loved him in classic films like Kramer versus Kramer, The Marathon Man, The Graduate. He's done some great stuff.
Yeah.
Hook is not one of them.
Why?
Oh,
Tell me. I'm kind of intrigued why you don't like this so much.
Robin Williams, who I love, was miscast. I felt he was kind of awkward. I mean, there was a lot of issues on the set.
It felt awkward because he was Peter Pan and he didn't know it. That's why.
It was awkward.
It's supposed to be like that.
Oh no. Well, there were, there's a lot of stories behind the scenes that it was a troubled production.
Really? It went through some troubles during the
Yeah,
production?
Julia Roberts and Spielberg didn't quite mesh well.
She was with Tinkerbell in that?
She was Tinkerbell in that, and I think she made a great Tinkerbell.
Yeah.
But yeah, not my thing. I'm not a huge Hook fan.
Well, which movie do you think kind of sparked Spielberg's rise to where his peak was?
Well, I'd have to say it would be,
It was like around in the 70s, right?
yeah. I mean, he first garnered a lot of attention with his first TV film.
I know he's responsible for, the quote unquote blockbuster summer movie.
Oh yeah, absolutely. 1975, with Jaws, that pretty much created the blockbuster and created the summer.
See, I bet that was a feat
Oh, it
to
was.
accomplish.
Oh, it definitely was. I mean, um, at that point, I mean, nobody had really seen that kind of fervor and excitement for a film. I mean, and that kind of box office, it was insane.
What kind of box office numbers were they hitting?
Well,
Where was Steven Spielberg hitting when he first, released Jaws?
wow. I mean, adjusted for inflation, I mean, he was hitting numbers like, I don't know. But they were very high numbers, for that time. And he eventually became the highest grossing film of all time. So yeah, even though, I mean, Spielberg has been solidified as the box office king of the 80s, he actually, his influence and everything began in the 70s. He had done a film for ABC television called The Duel, which I believe was, 1972, 73, with Dennis Weaver.
The Duel?
Yes, great film, a TV film. And I don't know if you've ever seen TV films from the 70s and the 80s. They were pretty crappy. I mean, they really low production value and so forth. And you had a lot of episodic directors who would do these films and so forth.
Yeah.
And what Spielberg infused in this film was a cinematic kind of approach, very dramatic. The way he moved his camera, the way he paced his film, his cuts, his editing, it was almost theatrical. In fact, you can get that copy today on widescreen, and it feels like a theatrical film.
Was this when was this made?
1972, I believe.
Was this one of his first movies that kind of showed his talent towards cinematography?
Yeah, absolutely. Cinematography, editing, pacing.
That's that's really good because it was only the budget was like $450,000.
Yeah, I mean, this was, he proved it isn't the money, it isn't about how many millions you can pour into a budget to get an effective response or an effective product. It's the artistry that you put into it.
Yeah, I was gonna say he's making it like art. Use what you got.
Yeah, and so after that, I believe it was 1974 was his first theatrical film. It was a film with Goldie Hawn called The Sugarland Express.
Sugarland Express.
Good film. The first collaboration with Spielberg and John Williams, the composer of such great films such as Star Wars,
Yeah.
Superman, Jaws. I mean, dun dun dun.
So this was one of the first time he scored one of Steven Spielberg's
it was
movies.
it was one of his first collaborations between the two, and it was a pretty good film. I loved it. It didn't do well at the box office. It pretty much flopped, and it wasn't until 75, against like we mentioned earlier, 1975, when he came out with Jaws, that he became this new.
Kind of put himself on the map.
Yeah, exactly. This new hotshot director. He was great. He definitely got a lot of attention, and that's what helped him. Led into 1977's Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which to this day is one of the most iconic UFO films ever made.
Oh yeah, by far. I mean, he kind of sparked a movement, in filmography and cinema, didn't he?
Oh, absolutely, and also an interest in UFOs.
Oh yeah.
People were like, "Oh wow!" And that's the thing. Just like people were suddenly afraid to go into the water after Jaws,
People were afraid to go outside.
Well, yeah,
Look up.
or get abducted, he definitely sparked the movement there, and then of course that brings us into 1979 was his first quote unquote flop, which was a movie called 1941 with John Belushi, Dan Aykroyd, Ned Beatty. And it's considered a flop.
I mean, that seems like a solid cast.
It is. It's supposed to be a comedy, but it's not really funny.
What do you mean supposed to be?
Well, well, it's about the hysteria of Californians that are preparing for a Japanese invasion.
Okay.
Just days after Pearl Harbor, and the wackiness, quote unquote, of the scenario, the situation, and John Belushi, R.I.P. John Belushi,
he made $35 million for the budget, right?
Right.
Opening weekend, U.S. and Canada, $2.7 million.
Yeah,
I'd say that's
a flop.
That is a flop.
I mean, it carried on to make some money back. Where its eventual run, I
guess worldwide it was like 90 million.
Yeah, so technically it was a flop, but not really. It did moderate box office, but it wasn't a total disaster. Well,
by the standards that count.
Right. I mean, watch the film, you go, that's a flipping disaster.
Why did I waste my time?
Right. It's like, please, oh Lord, give me back my 2 hours of life back. So that would be considered his first real big flop, because it was for that time, that budget was huge. It was a big, the guy just came off of Jaws, Close Encounters. So studios are like, whatever you want to do, let's do this. And
so 1941 was kind of him just doing whatever he wanted.
I don't know.
Kind of went loose.
He wanted to make a funny film, and on that account,
didn't work.
He failed. I'm sorry. I mean, it was not funny, despite the fact that you do have John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd.
No, really. Like, what the hell happened?
Yeah. Now, visually, it's a beautiful looking film. The cinematography, the score. I'm not sure who did the score on that. If you can, but
the score on 1941.
Yeah, and I mean, it just fell flat. And then of course he rebounded in 1981 when he teamed up with George Lucas
with Indiana Jones, right?
Yeah, Raiders of the Lost Ark, which I remember watching that trailer as a kid and just it blowing my mind. And it's like, wow. But one thing that Spielberg, he came out in the 80s and exploded into the scene right into the 80s.
Yeah.
He was celebrated.
Coming off in 1941, too.
Well, no, he wasn't celebrated for that. They were throwing stones at him for that. But no, producing and directing films like, you got Raiders of the Lost Ark, Poltergeist, E.T., Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, Gremlins, and so forth and so forth. He was celebrated in Hollywood as this, this monumental director, this big blockbuster film director. But he was also criticized a lot because by a lot of film critics and puritanical cinephiles that he killed the art of film. I mean, at the time you had
really that he killed the art.
I
think that has to do with the change.
It's an evolution in film.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like there's going to be those people that if something's changing or
they're going to hate it.
Yeah, there's going to be those haters.
Yeah, and it's the evolution of film. Film evolves. Is it good or is it bad? It's neither. It just is. I mean, like, for example, where we are currently in film and cinema today, we've definitely hit a different, era. We've evolved into a different industry. But that's a topic for another.
I was going to say, I got a lot to say about that.
Yeah.
Today's cinema and film.
Right. So, but he definitely, at the time of Jaws, you had films like 3 Days of the Condor, All the President's Men, and Justice for All, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Yeah.
Those are the kind of films dominating, the cinema in the early to mid 70s, and they were bleak, they were dark, they were dramatic. They didn't have the epic score and grandiose approach to filmmaking that filmmakers of the 50s had.
Do you think that change kind of has to do with the time?
You know, it has to
Well,
do with the new generation of filmmakers that came in.
well, what was going on in the world and what was going on with
I
people?
think so. Spielberg is he grew up on films from the 50s, and you got these films in the 1950s that had these grandiose scores. They were they were epic. The heroes or the protagonists in the film were larger than life, and you had
The
these
damsel in distress.
damsel in distress and all this. And also you got the 50s serials, which were short films that they would show in cinemas in the 50s, and there was a chapter every Saturday, so the
Yeah.
kids would go. Now, just to say, that was not my generation. That was a couple generations before me, but I've heard of this. But that's what he grew up on. The cliffhanger, the adventures, things like that. That's what influenced Spielberg, as well as other directors that came out later.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, you look at Indiana Jones. I mean, even 1941, which is not a great film, it has that grandiose score, that orchestral score that lifts the spirit.
So you can kind of see his inspiration.
Absolutely, and you see that into film now. He definitely forged the way for a lot of directors who were influenced and inspired by him.
Well, who do you think's the most? Which other than Spielberg, who do you think takes the most influence from him, from Spielberg?
Oh wow, oh that's a good question. I would say
Like who do you think he's affected more
currently,
with his work? Currently, yeah.
I'd have to say J.J. Abrams. Now I know a lot of people hate J.J. Abrams for what he quote unquote did or did not do to Star Wars.
Yeah,
Again,
the whole Star Wars fiasco.
yeah, I mean that we don't get into stuff here, that kind of stuff here on this podcast. We don't knock down or anything. That's not what we're about. So we're gonna take a quick turn away from that.
Yeah.
But definitely, J.J. Abrams is definitely one of those film directors who, I mean, you look at his film Super 8.
Well, yeah, I remember that one.
Yeah,
That was like when first. That was the. I feel like that movie sparked off the. It reignited the '80s group of friends riding on a bicycle, like adventure, sci-fi.
it definitely inspired that whole Stranger Things movement.
Yeah,
Which is great.
because I know we had like the Goonies and like other ones, and then I remember when I was younger, we had Super 8.
Right. And it definitely was an influence. And you see that influence even in his, when he took over the Mission Impossible films. I think it was
Steven Spielberg or J.J. Abrams?
J.J. Abrams. He started, I think.
Which one did he make?
It was Mission Impossible 3 and 1 or 2 after that.
Okay.
But you see his epic, grandiose approach to this filmmaking.
Yeah.
And practical special effects. He relies very little on CGI. And again, that would be a direct influence on Spielberg, from Spielberg to his current, style of filmmaking.
I think that's pretty good, because we could look forward to having J.J. Abrams movies
Mhm.
that they still carry on that feeling and that legacy.
Right, and there's still a lot of you got filmmakers now who are still kind of following that
Oh, yeah.
that influence.
And I feel like a lot of people take influence from him, whether they know it or not.
Oh, absolutely. Now, another thing was that aside from that criticism of him kind of killing the art of film and going too fluffy and fun and kiddie stuff, another thing that at one point at the peak of his popularity and success in the 80s, he was also being accused of fun stuff, interesting films, they're cute, whatever, but they're not really serious filmmaking. You're not a real serious, you're not a serious filmmaker. You make films for kids. And so
He was doing this?
you got
People
critics.
were talking about this?
Yeah, you got critics and columnists and editorials speaking about that Spielberg was not a real serious filmmaker. He makes movies for kids.
I feel like they're just trying to hate.
I think so. I mean, but this kind of like about 85, he released, he tried to go that direction and become a serious filmmaker. His first attempt at that was a film called The Color Purple. It came out in 85.
Yeah. Did he direct that one?
He directed it, yes. And it starred, it was with Whoopi Goldberg. I think Danny Glover was in it. It's based on an Alice B. Walker novel. And I saw it.
Danny Glover, Whoopi Goldberg, Oprah Winfrey.
Oprah Winfrey was in that. And
I remember I saw that as my mom was watching it, and I saw it as a kid.
yeah, it's a pretty heavy film. But, and again, keep in mind, in the 80s,
Morpheus is in there.
oh,
Lawrence Fishburne.
Lawrence Fishburne. It was a good film. I thought so. But I do see the point. If you watch it again, you do have that childlike wonderment, that fantasy or whimsical kind of approach.
But that's I feel like that's part of Spielberg's style, though.
It is.
You know,
That was his signature.
That's why I think those critics were saying that about him. They just didn't understand, like, he's got a certain feel to it.
Right.
And I think it's great.
Yeah, I mean, it was a signature, but again, he was still, he tried to make a serious film. He tried to be a serious filmmaker, and he was criticized for it still. And then a couple years later, he tried it again. A film with a very young Christian Bale, a film called Empire of the Sun. Beautiful film. Beautiful cinematography, great story. I think John Malkovich.
John Malkovich is great.
Yeah, anything he's in. Crappy movie, John Malkovich, worth watching.
Yeah, that makes it better.
And again, it wasn't met with much positive response. And then 86, he comes out with a movie called Always, which is a remake of a film with Spencer Tracy called a guy named Joe, about a firefighter pilot who, he was firefighter, yeah, firefighter pilot.
Firefighter pilot?
Say that fast 3 times.
Firefighter pilot. Firefighter pilot. What is that, though?
Those guys who drop water on forest fires in the plains.
Okay.
Holly Hunter and Richard Dreyfuss were in the remake. And it was a film that Spielberg had, it was called Always. Came out in what was it, 86?
89.
No, 86.
IMDb says 89.
Okay, we'll go with 89. But yeah, it really didn't solidify him as a serious filmmaker.
Why do you think it didn't, like, because he tried to make a serious movie?
Yeah.
What do you think went wrong?
He was still using elements of the fantastical, of wonderment, of awe. You know those.
Which is I mean, I'm not saying it's childish, but it's childlike. You know?
It is, exactly. You know those
It gives you that feeling.
right, those cliche Spielberg shots where, you know, you get a shot of somebody's face with the jaw dropped open, and they got lighting on them. Yeah.
Now I know his next movie, The Visionary, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then he came out with Hook.
Oh,
Do you think that helped his case?
No. Let's move on because I don't. No, Hook was another one that really didn't help his case at all. But it wasn't until 1998 with Saving Private Ryan.
What about Jurassic Park?
Oh, well, that was in the same category as the whimsical fantasy adventure.
Really? People were talking about
It's a kid film.
They just said this is a kid
It's
film?
a freaking kid film.
That's
Dinosaurs
not a kid
eating people. It was still a kid film.
See, that was back when, because I know the new ones, they don't put blood in it.
No. But still, they were very childlike in approach, or very, for kids. But again,
I mean, then in 1993, he did Schindler's List.
yeah. Oh, my bad. Yeah, it was. I'm thinking, right. Yeah, Schindler's List. That got him the attention.
Was that his stepping
That
stone?
was it. That's where Hollywood and critics said, Mr. Spielberg, you are a filmmaker, a serious filmmaker. And it was a heavy film. Very ballsy too.
Well, I mean, how did that one do?
Well, the box office was pretty damn good on it. It was a box office.
Liam Neeson,
yeah.
Ralph Fiennes, Ben Kingsley.
Yeah, it had a cast. It really had a cast. So Schindler's List was pretty much what solidified his legitimacy as a filmmaker. and of course, Amistad in '97, and then finally, of course, Saving Private Ryan in '98. And at that point, pretty much he was.
Well, I see here that, because Schindler's List was one of his, stepping stones to being a respected director, right?
Yes,
Apparently, it didn't do a good open.
really,
It says here the budget is $22 million,
right,
estimated, of course. The opening weekend, U.S. and Canada, $656,000.
right. But what was his
So-
overall take?
His overall take was $322 million.
Wow.
Yeah, so it seems to be that it
Right.
took some time for people to go.
Yeah, I mean,
you know,
come on, it's
after Hook, after 1941, no one's like, we're not going to see that. Crap.
right. It's like, okay, let's go from Never Neverland to
No.
Auschwititz. No,
Then your Uncle Jim
it's
comes
tough.
over, like, dude, Schindler's List. We're going to go see it again?
Right? Yeah, I don't think there was very repeat viewings of that,
Oh, yeah, repeat ones probably.
but
not.
it's
Like,
it's
one is
nonetheless one of the most memorable films in cinematic history.
enough. Oh, definitely.
So now pretty much, I mean, we've established, I mean, yeah, Spielberg, the most successful, the most influential filmmaker of all time, big, box office records, highest grossing films of all time, multiple Oscars.
And he's still, is he still going strong?
I think so. I mean, box office wise, not really. His last couple films, you have West Side Story and
Yeah.
The Fabelmans that just recently came out. They didn't do well at all, but they were beautiful films. I think he still has it. I don't think he is an irrelevant filmmaker. He still has something to say, and it's unfortunate that today's film-going audience.
I think it has to do with, the change of people.
I think
what's
so.
going on in the world.
That and the evolution of film and,
Yeah,
and
in the evolution of film, where
distribution.
Marvel's getting all the hype from everything.
Right.
Distribution, streaming.
Yeah, I mean, because West Side Story was nothing short of.
Well, when did
it was a masterpiece.
because that one did good in the box office, right?
No, not really.
Really?
No.
What about eventually?
I mean, no, it didn't do well. I mean, it
How did the Fablemans do?
Fableman's the same thing, and the Fablemans is if you everyone out there, if you haven't seen the Fablemans, give it a shot. If you're a Spielberg fan, and you like his work, I highly recommend it. The Fablemans is a sweet, very brutally honest film that is a semi autobiography of Spielberg's life and his influence of film and in his family and so forth. It's a beautiful film. I thought it was great. It was a subtle, sweet film, and maybe I think he is definitely could be the last of the film school generation filmmakers who is still relevant. Film school generation will go into in another episode.
Yeah.
But filmmakers that included Francis Ford Coppola, George Lucas, Mark Scorsese, Brian De Palma, all great filmmakers, and still I think do great work. But I think Spielberg remains still the most relevant. So I think that that about wraps it up for this episode. Any final thoughts, Owen? Guess not. Okay. Drew a blank.
Drew blank.
So again, we this is our first episode, and we hope you enjoyed it. We hope you join us next week for our next episode. Please help to support the podcast by giving us a favorable review. Subscribe or follow us on Amazon, Spotify, Deezer, Audible, or wherever you get your podcast fix. Also, don't forget to check us out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and on our YouTube channel. All the links are in our show notes. You can also contact us directly, give us some input, complaints, hate mail, whatever, at our email at thefilmjoepod@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you, get your feedback. So once again, thanks for listening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Joe.
I'm Owen. Thanks
Thanks
for
for
listening.
listening.